evening, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we are very delighted to see you out there this afternoon. We come to you every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3, and every second and fourth Mondays we'll have our coasters here, which I think will be today, as a matter of fact. We'll be here at 3:30 with Sartorius Black History Corner, and that normally runs about 30 minutes. We are an hour program here. And I will tell you that we have some good things to talk about today, but that's part of the course here at FlintTalkRadio.com. We want you to watch all the programs here at the studio, because the programs here are those that we hope will inform you about what's going on in your world, where you can take some advantages of that which is going on well in your behalf, and those things that we need to, in fact, change. We need to work together to bring about those things that need to bring about a greater America. To be honest with you, once we fix Washington, we'll have a great America. Most of the problems that we're having in this country, if truth be told, comes out of the nation's capital. And once we get that under control, I think we're going to be able to get back to some things we can pass down to our posterity as was passed down to us. But until we get a handle on what they're doing over there with this nonsense around the budget, and now they're talking about default and things of that sort, much of which is nothing but a lot of hot air designed to panic us. Once we get all that nonsense out of the way, we can begin to reconstruct that which the politicians are destroying. I wonder, as I was thinking about today's program, I wonder how much of what is happening right now is really what history records. I was thinking about how many societies have been destroyed and have been destroyed by the politicians. I don't know. I don't know if any societies that have been destroyed that have been destroyed by the business community. I'm willing to bet a dime to a donut, and I have not really checked this out holistically. I've been looking at some data, but I have not looked at all the data that's available to kind of put a spin on whether or not my view is right or not. But I do think that all the societies in which I have seen collapse have collapsed because of the internal politics of these politicians. Judge Stossel was doing a program calling the United States a new Rome, and was saying we headed down the same pathway as Rome took. And I can tell you that if that's true, then I know the steps that Rome took that brought about its internal collapse around, what was that date that we always remember about the collapse of Rome, around 476 or so, around that time period. And the politicians, led it down that path. And I see that if there's a parallel, the parallel exists in what is happening in Washington, D.C., not in terms of what is happening in the business community. And that's what I want to talk about this afternoon as I bring this discussion to the viewers and the listeners out there in Flint's #1 podcast program in Genesee County. And I really hope you will stay tuned to all the programs we have here, because people that really come into the studio, they work really hard to work on their programs, and they're not just coming in here and sitting in a chair and just simply emoting over the time period that they have allotted for their shows, nor is that taken lightly by those who work behind the scenes that you never see on camera, but they are instrumental to what goes on here as well. And they are the ones that are the technicians in the studio that have all these cameras in place here. I have to look around, see which one I'm on every week, because it's like there's a camera in different locations. And this is a good problem to have, as far as knowing we have multiple cameras, which tells us that we are a growing studio. Okay, let me get to what I came here to talk about today. And it's pretty much what we are talking about in a much more general sense on Facebook. I try to post at least one article each day in terms of what is going on, so that we can, in fact, have a discourse much wider than what we have here. But we hope that we'll have both audiences, both here on FlintTalkRadio.com, on what's going on, and also what's happening on Facebook in posts we do on a daily basis. There has not been a day that goes by in the last so many years that I have not at least posted one article on Facebook. And some people tell me, one person wrote yesterday that what I post on Facebook is too long. I'm publishing these books. But one person said this morning that the columns that we're putting on Facebook, the posts we're putting on Facebook, is the reason why she stays on the network. So I don't know how much money I got to charge the Zuckerberg for bringing some people to the network and whatever the cost that he's getting from that. He's a billionaire. I'm sure he can spare some. He can offer some spare change to those of us out here bringing the network into homes that would not be otherwise. But we are trying to be a resource out there in the community, and we hope that we are a resource here at FlintTalkRadio.com. Today, of all days, we're going to quote some things from the book written by James T. Bennett, and a person who's becoming one of my favorite writers, and that is Thomas J. DiLorenzo. I read about 3 or 4 of his books, and I can tell you that everything he writes, I have a tendency just to kind of sit in a chair, and almost in one session I finish half the book, and he's just such a insightful writer, and so everything he has his name on I try to get. And this book that's written by him and James T. Bennett is called Official Lies, and the subtitle is How Washington Misleads Us. I'm sure everybody out there in the listenership is shocked to hear that Washington misleads us, which is what they actually major in, as far as distorting what reality is and telling us that up is down and down is up. I think George Orwell would be proud of the fact that what he said back there in his book called 1984, which he wrote back in the 40s, I think he'd be very proud to know that what he said, I don't know how much was going on back in that time period, but it was certainly prophetic in terms of what is happening right now. And we have Washington telling us all kinds of things, and the official lies that are chronicled in this book, How Washington Misleads Us, which was written in 1992, it's gotten even worse since that time period. And now we are, 21 days beyond that point. We're now in 2013. And whatever lies they were writing about back in that time period when this book was published in 1992, and those lies have become more prohibitive today than it was back in that time period. And we'll talk about some of that as well. But I want to start out by reading some of the things that they listed in this book, because quite frankly, this book is one of the most insightful books that I have read about what is really going on in Washington. It gave me some new insights, which I placed on Facebook before coming to the studio. And I want to start by reading on page 25, and I'll read it first, and we're going to have a conversation about it, because I want to explain, as Ricky Ricardo would say, I want to explain, what it means, because I'm looking at the text here, and you don't have access to it. We don't put it on the screen as they do on some of the talk shows, but I'll explain what they're talking about. What it says on page 25 is budgetary policy, and make sure I get my glasses here, can be used to influence the electoral prospects of incumbent politicians. In general, expenditure programs are vehicles to secure political support, while the taxes necessary to finance these programs will by themselves diminish political support. So you have to spend money on various programs to attract the voters to vote for the incumbents. But the downside is the taxes that you must, in fact, install in order to pay for the programs in which expenditures are being paid out so those programs can have life. If the government operates within a balanced budget, he goes on to say, if the government operates within a balanced budget restraint, any proposal for expenditures must also entail a proposal for taxation to finance the program. The ability to engage in deficit finance severs this link between spending and taxing. See, what he's saying here is that if the quid pro quo relationship between spending and taxing was not severed, it would be very hard for these politicians to get away with going forward with programs that would raise taxes. So what's your best guess out there in terms of how to get around this, what would amount to a prohibition? How will they sever the link between an expenditure designed to attract the voters and then having to pay the cost of it, which would be something that decreases the voters' support for the program? Because if they have to pay for it, then that lessens the accoutrement that would entice them to support the program. And so how do they, in fact, get around that dynamic, that dilemma, really, in the process in terms of instituting programs, installing them, and then having to pay for them through the taxation on the person who are the beneficiaries of the programs to which expenditures are being made? Well, what they do is they sever the relationship between the program and the taxes. And how do they do that? Well, it goes on to say this: the ability to engage in deficit finance severs this link between spending and taxing. The incumbent party can pursue the vote-increasing ability of expenditure programs without having to bear the vote-decreasing burden of taxation. They do this because the political success will be promoted by deficit finance, because it appears to politicians and citizens as a less costly way of providing expenditure programs. And what he's saying here is that the way you sever the relationship, and there's a quid pro quo relationship between spending money on programs and having to pay for it. So how do they sever that quid pro quo relationship between the two? They simply institute the programs, which are a cost benefit to it. I mean, there's a cost analysis that's attached to it. And what they do is spend the money and then sever the relationship of having to pay for it by passing the cost on to the next generation of those persons who are non-voters. I think when you understand that is what they're doing through deficit spending, which is what they're talking about doing right now in Washington, you can see why they no longer, because you're waking up to what's going on, so you can see why they no longer use the word honorable in front of the names of these politicians. Because what is the honor in terms of putting the tax burden not upon the ones who are the beneficiaries of the programs that they're installing, but put the tax burden upon our children who are yet to become voters, who have no say in it? You can see how criminal the people are in Washington. Let me go to another page in the book, because these insights are from one page to another. Let me see if I can read this part, which ties into what I just read on page 25. It says here on page 28, politicians are able to fashion, and within very wide limits, even to create the will of the people. That is a profound statement. That Washington is not, you would think that what happens in terms of the political process is that the will of the people, that's when you have the government acting in the arena of what was intended by the framers, that the government is operating based upon the will of the people. You hear that, for example, in the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If I ask you out there in the listenership, what percentage of that applies in Washington in 2013, what would be your answer to that question? In terms of the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now, your eyes are being awakened by what is going on in Washington. You're definitely paying attention to it. And a lot of things that have happened and have awakened the passion of the American people. And we see that because we see different groups going to Washington. We saw the bikers in Washington on 911. And then we're seeing the truckers go there now, and we're seeing other demonstrators there. We saw the veterans there last week. And the people that went and landed in Normandy, if you thought that those little barriers were going to keep those veterans who moved Hitler out of the way in World War II, if you understood who those persons were who stood down Hitler and stood down Mussolini, if you thought, and Tojo and Hirohito in Japan, if you thought those barriers were going to stop those veterans who had stood down those persons during the Second World War, you were sadly mistaken. They moved those things out of the way and went right in there where the memorial was, and it did not stop them from doing what they felt they were compelled to do. This memorial was made on their behalf, and then to tell them they couldn't go there because the government had, in quoting, and put this in all kinds of quotes, the government had in fact shut down, and we haven't seen it shut down not one day. And they went through that barrier and defied the people in Washington. It says here, politicians are able to fashion it within very wide limits, even to create the will of the people. You're supposed to have the will of the people creating what the government does. I mean, they reversed it. So the will of the people is being subverted by government. Let me tell you how they do that, by reading what he says in addition to that, because this is very interesting what Washington is doing. When you understand what they're doing, you really have to kind of laugh at them. Well, you kind of take it seriously, but you're laughing at the same time because you see the comedic things that are happening there around the idea these people are actually serious. I mean, none of them have any honor. They go on to say what we are confronted with in the analysis of political processes is largely not a genuine but a manufactured will. So far as this is so, the will of the people is the product and not the motive power of the political process. That is, I think that's, of all the profound statements made in this book, that's one of the more profound statements, because what he's saying here on page 28 is that the will of the people is actually manufactured by the politicians in Washington. They're manufacturing the will of the people. And the way they're doing it right now, let's look at how they're doing it right now. They're doing it right now in Washington by making us believe that it is our will that they open the government back up, which the government never closed in the first place. Show me where it was after 1201, October the 1st, where we had a government shutdown. Now, do we all agree that when you say shutdown, you're talking about closing the doors? Whatever business shuts down. What does that mean? It means that you can't. It means that there is not a business up in there to go to because the business closes doors. And now we're being told that a shutdown is laying off, now get this now, 800,000, and these are this is not my term, this is the term that they use, I'm just using their term. And they said 800,000 non-essential workers were laid off. Now they kept they kept the essential workers. They laid off the ones that are not essential. They downsized, in other words, got rid of the ones that are not necessary for the government to function. And then they told us that that is a government shutdown, and when nobody felt the effects of it, they want to make sure that you felt the effects.
Well, yeah, they're shutting down sites, using people to get you to shut down the places that will require you having somebody there in the first place. I mean, having people there, you probably, if you weren't really gone there, you would have seen a parks range or anything. Now they're putting people in there to tell you can't be there when they were not needed in the first place on the average.
They're paying the people to stand there.
Right, to tell you to go back. They're just basically saying, we're going to make this hurt you because you won't give us more of your money.
That's what they're saying.
And it's like, we got everybody we paid for. We paid for well, but damn it, we're not going to let you have your own money. And then when we pinch you enough, we're going to raise our own income on you, and you're going to have to pay it.
And John, when they did, the thing that broke the camel's back for a lot of the American people those who were not paying attention. But what made them, even the low information voters, pay attention was where they had this last caveat. I think that's the one that broke the camel's back, where veterans who, soldiers who had lost their lives, where Congress had taken out of the total package of bills to be passed, the Republican Party sent a bill over to the Senate that nobody dared say they were not going to, in fact, vote for, and that was to finance our warriors, our best citizens who are serving this country in the military, some of our best citizens, and they were going to, and they dared, the Republican Party really dared the Democratic Party, which said we can't take out these things and then have specific parts of the government funded. They took out the bill to pay our military, and they dared not come out and then say that they were not going to finance that. But what they did not do specifically was say that the finance of those who died on the battlefield, those families of those fallen warriors who had given the ultimate sacrifice, who are promised $100,000 to the families of those warriors, they were saying that the bill did not cover that, and when they refused the payment to those families whose loved ones had died, even the low information voters came out of the woodwork to raise an objection to that. It was unbelievable that these politicians would stoop to the depths. I mean, you're already down in the sewer, but stoop to the depths of saying that they didn't have any legal claim upon, as if they're following, as if they're doing that which is legal in the first place, as if that which is lawful guides what they do, and for them to stoop that low, folks, I got to tell you, in 2014. I know everybody's saying the outrage. I just read the polls the other day that said only 5% of the people, having the confidence in Congress. But that's a lot of hot air unless in 2014 our voices have got to be heard. It's as simple as that. We cannot take this insult. These people have given their lives for the country, and their families have to have their bodies flown in here by those cables attached to the caskets, and their honor guard is not there.
For a bunch of politicians who are nothing more than self-serving, conniving poop heads, these people are going and saying to these people who actually put their butt in the line for this country, you don't deserve that which we used to guarantee you. Because we got to cut back. We're not going to cut our pay or our perks or our fun stuff. We're going to cut the necessities to you. We're going to cut your burial. We're going to cut everything because they're abandoning. They're throwing the veterans under the bus.
Unbelievable. That I think of all the things they've done, and I find most of the things they do in Washington to be unforgivable. But of all the things they've done that's unforgivable, this is the most strenuous example of it. And I think that this is not only unforgivable, it's unconscionable. And for them to have engaged in this particular practice here, look, we got to do more than talk about throwing these bombs out. It is out. The Declaration of Independence says it is our right, is our duty to alter, and even says to abolish. We may not have gotten to that point yet, but they're leading us to that brink because they will not quit. But we have definitely got to alter what Washington is in fact doing. And when they did that last week, some people that we had not heard from in terms of being outraged came out of the woodwork to express their dissent from what Washington is doing, because when you start doing that to those fallen soldiers, even those who are not engaged normally in the political arena and are not watching what politicians in fact do and believe a lot of what Washington says, not that I believe anything that they say that comes out of Washington, but when that happened there, I saw some new faces out there voicing their dissent. And there's some positive signs that are happening at the University of Colorado. That's a state where they've recalled two of their state representatives, those that were sponsoring prohibitions against the Second Amendment's right to bear arms. And there are no restrictions placed in the Second Amendment on anybody's right to bear arms in this country. I'm sorry if you don't think that John Doe and Jane Doe should not have a weapon. That's your opinion. The Constitution is very specific about the fact that there is to be no prohibition. If you do not like that, you got to admit it. You just can't come in here and say that your will supersedes that which is written in the documents. That's the law of the land. It didn't work that way. And yet they're trying to tell us that paying the veterans was not in the bill they passed to continue to pay our military soldiers. But if the soldiers are deceased, there's nothing there that covers them in death, only when they're out there on the battlefield. You got to be kidding me. You have absolutely got to be kidding me. Because that cannot be what you're telling the American people. I know you're not telling me that, because I know better than that. And I am outraged over it, as those people that are paying attention are outraged over that. Because you just cannot tell me and tell the American people, those who are paying attention, that when you give your life for this country, somehow there's some language here that keep the country from being committed to those persons who lost their life in serving this nation. How can that be? And any politician that says that, they must be turned out of office. It's as simple as that. And we have to have a long memory. You know, one thing they're trying to do, I was noticing last week they were saying they didn't want a 6-week fix on the present problem, the crisis that they've created. It really is not even a crisis. Not only because the government's not shut down, but even if the government did shut down, have they stopped taking up taxes? Anybody out there that went back and changed your W-2 form, your withholding form on your job and said, well, the government shut down, so the cost has gone down. So what we're going to do here is we're going to stop paying our taxes or we're going to take some more money and put it in our pockets and not send as much to Washington, because if the government shut down, the cost has been decreased. And therefore our taxes should be reduced. Has anyone done that? I don't think anybody did it. There are no reports of it. Certainly has not been done in a widespread manner. So this is creating less money in the federal coffers. If it had been the case, we had reports on it by now. And there have been no reports on it. And so they're still collecting, by my estimate, they're still collecting 200 and, I'm going to give a conservative estimate here, 230, well, the conservative estimate would be $210 billion a month. Well, it really looks like now, since the government is collecting more money than I first of all thought they were collecting. I thought it was like $2.5 trillion a year, but it's really more than that. They are collecting about $3 trillion a year in federal taxes. So that means about $230 billion a month they're collecting in taxes. So if that be the case, then there is no reason for them to be talking about default, because the national debt, and this is again an estimate which you've had different numbers, I would say that the national debt is about, the service of national debt is about $400 billion. Some put it at a lower rate than that. We all know that the national debt is now approaching, by October the 17th, $16.7 trillion. And when you look at the fact that we have a 15 plus trillion dollar GNP, our national debt is larger than our GNP. But let's say that you're now going to approach the ceiling, the present ceiling of $16.7 trillion by October the 17th. Well, the service of that debt is $400 billion. That's the higher estimate. Some come in a little bit lower than that. Some are saying that the service of debt is like $300 billion a year. And so the service on a monthly basis, therefore, is between 25 and $30 billion. I would say that if it's $400 billion, which is my estimate of what the service of debt actually requires, then it takes $34 billion at the highest, $34 billion of service of debt, which means then out of the $210 to $230 billion that they raise, out of that monthly amount, you have to take as much as $34 billion of that to pay off the service of the debt. So if you do that, then how much is in fact left? I'll let you do the math, but just simply subtract 34 at the most, $34 billion from at the least $210 billion, and then see what's left over. And then ask yourself the question, why then, given the amount of money that is left over, more than 100 and some odd billion dollars, why then is it necessary to talk about, out of the same discussion of service and debt, you talk about raising the debt ceiling? Why would that be necessary? Why would it not be to fix it on the other end, which is in fact to reprioritize federal expenditures and then live within the budget of that which is left after paying off the money to service the debt? In fact, to be honest with you, if they really were responsible in Washington, they would be paying not only the service debt, but paying down the debt. Because by service of debt, what they really mean is that they're paying on the interest of they're paying the interest of the debt. They're not actually paying down the debt, which is the principal of the debt. They're not paying anything on that. And so the amount, so as you know, because you borrowed money and I borrowed money, so we know how it works as far as our own debt is concerned, is that as long as the debt exists, you're paying for the very existence of the debt. That's why you see those numbers on those debt charts when they show it on television. It's frightening because those numbers are going by so rapidly. Like what is it? Like $47,000 a second. You're seeing that those numbers are shooting up. It's frightening just to watch it. But sometimes you see those charts on television after the government is closed for the day. Because the government shuts down every day, quite frankly. 5 o'clock, those guys got the roller skates on. They're out that door over there with, they don't want to miss the dinner and the caviar and the red wine they're drinking. They sell more red wine around Washington than any other place in the country. And the amount of caviar that's served up there exceeds what is the average throughout the country. So they're not missing, dinner, and they're going to be out that door after that clock strikes, whatever time they have to, they leave. And every once in a while you see a meeting on Saturday to kind of fool us into believing that they are actually taking care of the business, which they couldn't do during the normal week. But that's because they won't come together during the 5-day week and stop the charade that they're running on the American people. So once in a while they meet like on Saturday, like they did this past Saturday. But basically, they're out the door and they're taking care of their private affairs. And we can only imagine what that is outside the view of the voters. We can only imagine what those guys are doing, even when they're supposed to be out in the halls of Congress meeting on the people's business. Nobody's up there no cameras in there with a view of where they're sitting in all these rooms to make sure that they're all present. Now, and I bet you on a given day, you'd be surprised how many of them are not present. They're certainly not present in the chambers of the House and Senate, which is why that camera never goes out there to see who is out there listening as they're up there on those microphones emoting about whatever the issue is of that moment. They never will. I tell you what C-SPAN will not do, and their contract requires them not to do it, and that's to swing out there and see who's actually sitting out there listening to them as they drone on, and we're paying attention to it on radio and television, but they're not out there listening to that. So those guys are out of the halls of Congress. Some of them are in meeting rooms, but I can't believe that 535 people are in these meeting rooms. I mean, where would that be? What room holds that many people? And let's just have the camera go around there and show us who's out there as they go on these prepared speeches, which is for your eyes and for your ears. But this is just another part of the theatrics that are taking place on a daily basis in Washington. So far as this is so, the will of the people, they say, is a product and not the motive power of the political process. So they're actually creating the will that they want us to have. It's manufactured. I mean, for example, although none of us have witnessed the government shutdown, we all are clamoring for the government to open back up. Even though the fact of the matter is that there is no evidence the government shut down. I mean, what is the evidence of that?
Okay, well, if a business could shut down, it means they wouldn't be getting any income, they wouldn't be getting any, paying bills other than utilities, perhaps. But no, it's still ticking away. The money never stops. I mean, and the need for the money never stops. So we're not getting a reprieve on this.
No, John. So what is that definition of a shutdown? What would be their definition of what a shutdown actually is?
Well, I think it terrifies them that actually most people's lives are probably going to go, unhindered with the shutdown. And if people start dawning, if it continues, like, what the hell do we need you guys for? And another thing is too, it's like politicians always make these spending things. They do all the spending. Then you look at aghast at you when you ask about why you're doing this. Like, well, you asked for it. Like, the hell I did. I didn't ask for this. You have people come in and ask, say, we'll give you money if you give us somebody else's money. We'll give you a bigger chunk of the stuff we got coming in. And it's like it'll never end because they're always getting back from somebody else. They're always getting it from a special interest group to do their bidding.
Yes, John, you hit the nail on the head. They wanted to make the pain visible because nobody knows anything different. I mean, I had one person that went out with a camera. He was asking people, has anything happened since the shutdown occurred? And they were saying that they had not noticed any change. So they had to get out there and make sure that you saw that there wasn't changes. I mean, big government has been missed here. And what they were doing is what James Bennett and Thomas DiLorenzo said that was being done. They're manufacturing the will of the American people. They're telling us that what we didn't see happen out of our own vision, and we have eyes. I mean, let's use our own eyes here, and not the government's eyes. We saw there was no shutdown. We saw a downsizing, and that's a good thing. But they're calling it a shutdown, and yet they told us that these are the non-essential workers. If we were not having our will manufactured, rather than being concerned about the government being quote-unquote shut down, we should be clamoring for it to stay shut down to the extent of the shutdown, because all that was dismissed from the workplace were the and let me reiterate what they said and repeat the words they used, the non-essential workers were the ones who were laid off. If a business has non-essential workers, they're not furloughed, they are fired. Because you can't carry that kind of baggage in a business that's trying to make a profit, which it must make if it's going to, in fact, stay viable, because the way the business absolutely and actually operates is that it has a turn of profit. It must make more money than what it pays out to the workforce for capital investment, such as buying machinery needed for its operation and things of that sort. It has some money left over because when a crisis comes up, it's got to, in fact, be able to handle the crisis. So it has to be able to make a profit over and above the income it brings in. If it doesn't do that, then it's out of business because it's no longer viable. And yet they're telling us that when government does that, it amounts to a shutdown. You see the manufacturing of our will, because now they have us clamoring for, we can't have a government shutdown. We must have the government open back up. But that makes no sense, not only because the government never shut down, but it makes no sense because the fact is that when the government is fully operational, that we have going on a $17 trillion deficit, where if it was shut down, at least we wouldn't have that deficit being put on the back of our children, where they have to pay off a debt that we are, in fact, incurring, because there's no will to pay for the expenditures that these politicians are putting out there for the American people to enjoy.
You ever wonder what would happen if we insisted after World War II, for example, England, France, all the other countries, Russia, that we give, Soviet Union, we give money to and assistance to, actually paid back the damn loans?
It
Could you imagine how much further ahead we would have been?
Yes, and if we would...
And then there's people are sitting there holding a gun to our head saying, you better not do this, you better not do that, we're going to dump you if you... when we stood by them all this time?
Yes, the Marshall Plan is what you're referring to, and we went over there and rebuilt Europe, and those ingrates, look what they're doing as a way of saying thanks a lot, which is what they're saying.
With friends like that, we don't need any enemies.
Yeah, well, and that's why we have to turn inward and at least have our friends inside of the nation's capital doing that which is in the national interest of the United States, and they're not doing that. And when you have that going on the outside and then have what is taking place on the inside, and all that converging together, you can see what what the outcome of that's going to be, and why we are in such dire straits right now in this country, because we have not only external problems, we have internal problems as well, and somewhere we've got to get control over that which is driving this train, and that's not being in the caboose, that's being in the engine room, because we have got to go and take some control back from what is happening in Washington, because we're supposed to be the ones that is in fact manufacturing our own wheel. We are the people, government of the people. They say government of the politicians, government of the people, by the people. They're just some of the people. They're not all the people. It is not in their name that they ought to be acting. They'll be acting in the name of the American people. It's not. To me, this is not. I say this every week almost. This is not chemistry in terms of how the government is supposed to operate. And when the framers put in Article 4, Section 4, that every state government is to be promised a Republican form of government, that implies that the federal government must be a Republican form of government also, meaning that it is carrying out the will of the American people. And when I hear this president saying that he's not going to negotiate with Congress, when the fact is that he's not going to negotiate with the House of Representatives, when the fact is that in Article 1, Section 7, the House of Representatives given the purse strings that would be the expenditures have to go through the House, because the idea is that the House has to go before the voters every 2 years, unlike the Senate that goes there before the voters every 6 years. You want to have the voters able to hold the person that controls the purse strings accountable on a more regular basis. So every 2 years, if they're doing things untoward, we can speak to them within a immediate time period and then change that particular dispensation by changing the discourse, by in fact electing other people to take their place within the time period in which the violations are occurring. That's the idea behind it. And for the president to say that he's not going to negotiate with those who are given the constitutional authority to hold on to the people's money as a way of holding government in check otherwise, and say they're not going to negotiate with those who are given that responsibility to carry out that particular end, that's just another example of how the legal parameters that place chains around the government and are to serve as prohibitions against government conduct that is extreme. It shows you how much that is not respected, and how those parameters are not in place, because they keep on knocking them down and things of that sort, while telling us that they can't do certain things because it's outside of the parameter of that which is allowed, as if they respect the parameters of the law and that which is in fact restricted. They don't have any problem violating it when it restrains what they do and what they will to do, only when it is something they don't want to do. And George Wills, I keep paying more and more attention to him now he's moved over to Fox. He comes on Chris Wilder's show. I don't see him on other programs like they do some of the other pundits, like Juan Williams, who shows up too much on Fox and is making too little sense more and more. The more I listen to Juan Williams, whom I met and who signed a copy of my book, I want him to take his name out of my book. his name is on the book, so I don't know why I wanted to put the name inside and sign it. He wrote a nice comment, but the one is the one Williams. Can we talk? The one is the one Williams. I mean, look, but he's on all the shows. George Wills is only on Chris Wiles's program, but when I was listening to George Wills, I can see what I was missing was over there with an FBS soup. Those networks that drowned his voice out, because those guys, these progressives, he's sitting there as a Lone Ranger and all these voices around. I couldn't even listen to the man, because in order to get to him, I had to listen to all these other folks. Because over there with Fox, where they got some people now that sound a lot like him, so I can stay there for his comments. But they start, really the 2 weeks he's been on Fox, he only started last Sunday, but the 2 weeks he's been on Fox, I noticed that Chris Wallace starts out the program by asking George Wills to start the comments off. I mean, they have a lot of respect for this guy. And when he's talking, you can see them actually looking there, very attentive. I'm almost watching the guy's mouth. They want to get the words out before he comes out the guy's lips. And he made the comment. He said that the negotiations can be serious in Washington, because when the Republican Party that continues to make different overtures, every time they make an overture to do what they said they have to do to get a deal done, then they change the goalposts. They move the goalposts. And just ask yourself, because we all beginning to open up our eyes now, ask yourself, why would that be the case? That they make an overture, and when they change so that they're putting some things in that they said they have to have in order to get a deal struck, they do that, and then the goalpost is changed. Now they're saying that not only is a clean deal, which at first meant no attachments by the Republican Party. In other words, a clean bill is a bill that everything that you want to do is just what we want to do. So they take all of the things out and then send that up, no longer tying it to defunding Obamacare necessarily. That is watered down. And now they just want, if you just simply will allow us to have place in there something to do with putting cost measures in place as we raise the debt ceiling, and they won't even do that. And I'm against that, because let's be honest. I mean, there's a contradiction for them to say on the one out of one side of their mouth, we're going to raise, we're going to give the government more money to spend, and on the back end, we're going to say we're going to make these cuts. Why don't you make the cuts and then not increase the expenditures? In other words, you see the game that's being played. But they went with the Republican Party to get away with that. And now they're saying that now that you moved in this area that we were talking about before, now that you've done that, we're not satisfied with that particular movement. After all, we want to now talk about lifting the sequester, which was the fact that we were going to make another budgetary restraint upon government. They're now saying that that should be, in fact, changed as part of the deal. And why are they doing that? We got our filters on now, right? And we're paying attention because they don't want a deal. The reason why they keep talking about default on the loan is because they may well bring that about. After telling us of how bad that would be, they may well be anti-American, and that's what they really are. They're not patriots up there in Washington. Who would you say is a patriot in Washington? They may well be so unpatriotic as to bring about the very thing they keep telling us about. And what Mark Levine said, I didn't hear this, but I read it in one of the posts on one of the, I think the Media Research Center, maybe it was one of the other networks, quoted Mark Levine as saying what they're setting up to do right now, what Obama's setting up to do, is to go around Congress if they don't get a deal that he is setting up a dismissal of the Constitution and putting into place the payment, regardless as to whether or not a deal is made or not, to take over the role of the House of Representatives and to do that which is only allotted to the House of Representatives in the Constitution. If he does that, and they take that and not respond to it, then hey, folks, we are in Houston. We have a problem. We have a devastating problem, because at that point, it means we don't have a Constitution anymore. That the safeguards that are placed there as a way of putting restraints around government, those restraints have been totally broken. Because the purse strings is the ultimate check upon the government. And if the House, which is the role is assigned to the House in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 7, if that is taken over and the President has the control of the purse strings, then we can forget it. At that point, that proverbial straw has broken the camel's back, and we are in absolute dire straits. We don't have a Constitution anymore.
Well, I'd like to ask these politicians, like, how much is another person expected to take care of the other people around them? You're taking everything from one group or to hand over to another group. How do you expect these people to exist when you keep on doing this? They're going to have a backlash, and then you're going to be there saying they're mean-spirited, and you're going to put them down without any kind of consideration. You're going to murder these people. That's what they want. They seem to try to orchestrate events. The people are going to be so agitated, they're going to react violently. They're going to.
I was looking to see what reference I could read in reaction to what you just said, John. And on page 29, here's a point that's made by the authors of this book, Official Lies, and how Washington misleads us. They make this point. They say that what you will not hear mentioned is the economic law of opportunity costs. Government jobs are financed by withdrawing resources from the private sector to pay for programs in the public sector. They're going to say, we destroy a refinery worker's job to create one for the road crew sector. In other words, the composition, let me make sure I say that right, the composition, meaning that the way you can change the way the workforce is composed. The composition of the workforce can be changed. It says the composition of employment may be altered, which is what they're doing. They're not creating any jobs. What they're doing is changing the composition of the workforce, changing the private sector jobs to public sector jobs by taking money out of the private sector to pay for what they're doing in Washington. But this idea of government can create jobs, that's ludicrous and nonsense on the face of it. But that tells me a lot about what politicians are actually thinking about, who they actually are. And also it tells me about their jealousy of the role that's played by the business people, who are really the ones that create jobs and the ones that really have skills. The composition of employment may be altered, but no government has yet invented the magic wand that creates jobs out of thin air. So they are just realigning jobs, in terms of when you take money out of the private sector, which is where the money is actually created. The government doesn't have any money unless it goes in there and begin to print it on those printing press and churn out money and throw it out here as fiat capital, which is really nothing but counterfeit money. When if you went to your printing press that you made in your basement, and I'm certainly not saying do this because this is prohibited by law, but the government does it all the time. And when they print the money out, they can in fact expand the currency, but and then throw it out there as putting money on the highways and things like that. But it's really just opportunity cost, and what they're doing is just rearranging the workforce and taking credit for it as if they are in fact creating jobs. They're actually killing jobs because they're taking money out of the private sector and putting it in the public sector, where the jobs are in fact paid for artificially. You have to create, in other words, when jobs are created, then wealth has to be created to pay for the jobs. And what they're doing is taking wealth already created, right, through your checks and through your manufacturing of different products, and they're taking that money, which is the creation of wealth, and then taking it and consuming wealth. In other words, government doesn't create wealth. Government consumes wealth.
Another thing is too, it's like, how many times you sit around, you and your friends sit around saying, gee, I don't want another bureaucracy that I have to deal with. I want another bunch of, timetables kept on me, renewing this, renewing that. I really want that. You don't sit around and think of how much more, bureaucracies you want to be developed. You want to be able to buy something you really desire. The government doesn't provide anything you desire. They force you to buy stuff because they want you to have it.
Yes,
and then they're going to put a gun to your head, forcing you to pay for something you have no inclination to buying on your own.
Yes, it's all force. If you go into a business and the guy is in fact telling you off and doesn't like the way you approached the business and things of that sort, and you tell him off in return, you get him to exchange, the worst that can happen is the guy can tell you to get out of his business, and then you go to the business that sells products similar to his product. There's no force involved in it. You can simply just change who you're doing business with. But when the government gets involved in it, then what happens in that case there is that there is this government force that's in back of what the government says you must do. And it's not any negotiation in it. You do it or you go to jail in the process. And that's where we are right now in terms of the government having one position and business having another position. I'm for the government laying off 800,000 workers, and it has not shut down. What it did is it downsized, and businesses do that all the time. And they do it, quite frankly, because there's a cost factor attached to it. And they don't furlough these workers, they lay them off. And therefore, what it does, it creates greater efficiency, because when you lay off the workers, it forces everybody else to do a more efficient job because you don't have the same numbers on board. When government closes down, they claim that there's no efficiency because you don't have this mammoth workforce. But they told us right in front of our face, and I want you to keep in mind what they told you, and that is that these are non-essential workers who were laid off. That means we're paying 800,000 people in Washington who are not necessary, who are on the public doles anyway, and you're paying money for people that do not, in fact, have to be there to do a job. The question is why they're hired in the first place. And the answer to that question there is they're hired in the first place because that's not about doing a efficient job. It's about power. The bigger government is, the more people they can bring aboard, the more they can, in fact, be in different quarters of the country to do more control. This is nothing but about power. I wonder what you thought about what Ben Carson said last week. And they were asking some people on the network, what did he mean by this? And he said that Obamacare is slavery. And they asked some people on these different networks, MSNBC were asking some people to, how do you equate that with slavery? Well, it's very easy. When the government is controlling your health care and controlling life and death, that's what the slave masters did. That's what he meant. And they're taking the rocket science to figure it out. If the government controls whether or not you get health care or not, and they are in control of that, they're controlling your life and your death. And that's the same power, that's what Ben Carson was talking about, the same power that the slave owners had. And if anybody tells me again that the Supreme Court has authorized it as being illegitimate because it's constitutional, if anybody tells me that again, I will tell you about the 13th Amendment, which prohibits slavery in this country. And that's what we have. Okay, these are official lies coming out of the book by Thomas DeLorenzo and James Bennett, How Washington Misleads Us. And it's not going to change. And I want you to stay tuned to Satura's Black History Corner. They're already in the studio, and they're ready to go at 3:30. I'm going to be looking forward to listen to their program. When I go home, I rush out of here and rush to see their program live, and want you to stay tuned for that program. It comes on in about 30 minutes. Until next time, I want you to follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.